Universal audio is essentially the Apple of the audio industry. Many people believe they're overhyped. I've even gone on record saying that they're too expensive, and yet here I am with an Apollo Twin X Gen 2. So I'm going to give you my honest thoughts on it. Much like Apple, these interfaces are expensive compared to their competitors, and I think sometimes it's incredibly frustrating, and other times it feels well worth it. I actually had an Apollo Twin years ago and eventually moved away from it because at that stage of my life, it was definitely overkill. But now I'm revisiting it as part of a series comparing 3 highly renowned audio interfaces. So make sure and leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more from this series. Let's jump straight into it and talk about my first impressions of the Apollo Twin X. In case you missed that first video in the series where I compared my first impressions of the Apollo, Babyface Pro, and Zen Quadro, the Apollo Twin actually won that comparison, even though there are some things I didn't enjoy about this initial introduction. For instance, if you're going to spend $1,000 on an audio interface and it requires a Thunderbolt cable, which most people don't already have lying around, you'd think that they should include one with the interface. They certainly do not. To be fair, I knew this going in because I had the same frustration years ago with my original Apollo Twin. Unboxing the Apollo Twin X felt like unboxing a new MacBook or something, which for me is the cherry on top. I don't want to know how much more I'm paying for the fancy packaging here, but you really get the feeling that this is something special. You can go back and watch my first impressions video if you want to hear more about my initial experience with the Twin X. But now, let's talk about the standout features. I'm sure we all know about the ability to use your Apollo's DSP to power UAD plugins, allowing you to either monitor with near zero latency or even print the effects on the way in. Along with that, you get Universal Audio's Unison preamp technology, which allows your Apollo pre's to take on the characteristics of classic hardware preamps. So the Apollo actually changes the impedance and gain staging behavior of those pre's depending on what you have loaded into the Unison slot in the UAD console software. Oh yeah, you also get the UAD console software, which is great. There's quite a bit of routing you can do with the console software, and it's how you're able to set up the UAD plugins for either monitoring or recording with near zero latency. You also get room correction features inside the console software powered by SonarWorks Sound ID reference. If you're familiar with Sound ID, you essentially get a readout of the acoustics in your room using a measurement microphone and apply a correction profile to Sound ID to provide a flatter listening environment. You can also apply this to your headphones. But it's cool because this is now being powered by the Apollo instead of a plugin in your DAW. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, the Unison preamps on the Gen 2 Apollos have an assistive auto gain feature, which could be useful for somebody who's recording themselves, as they can just play and allow the Apollo to set the gain instead of going back and forth. And one feature that blew my socks off, the integration with Softube Console 1. I've grown to love the Softube Console 1 system and have greatly appreciated that UAD plugins are available natively within that system. But the real magic is once you switch to UAD console mode, which turns your Console 1 into a controller specifically for UAD console. Everything is completely mapped out already. The input section controls the actual input gain of the Unison preamps. Your output controls the fader of the selected channel within UAD console, and you can see the meters for all of your ins and outs across the top where you can select each channel. You can even load in and control DSP powered plugins straight from Console 1. It operates very much like if you're controlling a DAW, and it's just a lot deeper than I would have imagined that it could be. I'm even able to do this without opening up the UAD console software. Now the problem is that I'm sold on the Console 1 fader to pair with this. By the way, if you're interested in purchasing the Apollo Twin X, the Console 1 stuff that I just mentioned, or really any other piece of audio gear, I'll have some links down in the description of this video. I genuinely love buying gear from Zounds because their prices are spot on, their shipping is insanely fast, and they even have flexible payment plans for most of their gear. They're actually allowing me to use these interfaces for this series and are not controlling anything that I say in these videos. So if you happen to purchase anything through those Zounds links, it's also a great way to support this channel without paying any extra money to do so. Now let's talk about some pros and cons of the Apollo Twin X. I'll start with the pros. These preamps sound great even without anything loaded into the unison slot. There's a good amount of ins and outs on the Twin X. A lot of people will be fine with this, and you can even expand it if you have a cheaper piece of gear like the ADA 8200 via ADAT. Most everything is on the back of this interface, which I really appreciate. It just looks really clean on my desk, even with the bunch of cables plugged in. I also like the multi-function buttons with the little display. If you've selected an input, it'll show you one set of labels, and if you've selected an output, it'll show you another set of labels. I think that's a really clever way of trying to keep the layout of this interface simple. I also really enjoy the visual feedback of the lights on the Apollo. It's very apparent when your monitors are muted or how high or low your input gain is set. Also, add in all the other stuff I mentioned earlier in this video. There is a lot to love about this interface. But now let's talk about the cons, because there are some things I'm not crazy about. Firstly, these interfaces are expensive. Many of us know that. But then you add in the fact that there's no Thunderbolt cable included, and to get the most out of these interfaces, you're probably gonna wanna drop some money on their plugins, which can be quite costly. On top of that, one of the coolest new features is the integration with SonarWorks Sound ID, and even that is a paid add-on. Obviously, you can't just make someone else's product free. That's not really what I'm saying. I'm just saying that you should expect to pay a lot of money in addition to the chunk of money you spent on the interface itself. Another thing I don't like about the Twin is that it doesn't have an ADAT output on board. It's fine, but if you want ADAT out on an Apollo, you're gonna have to make the jump to the X4, which is quite a bit more expensive. The interface I've been using in the studio is the Audient ID22, which is quite affordable. Even the newer ID24 is a bit less than the Apollos, but the ID interfaces have ADAT in and out, along with some other cool features. It just makes me wonder, how much would it cost for UA to include an ADAT output with the Apollo Twin? Lastly, and this is quite nitpicky, I mentioned on the RME video that I prefer to have lots of physical controls on an interface, within reason, of course. I think the Apollo is miles above the RME in that regard, but you're still left with one large knob to control all of your ins and all of your outs. I just think they do it a little bit better here. I mentioned at the top of this video that Universal Audio is much like the Apple of recording gear. Apple has its $6,000 Pro Display XDR. UA has a $6,000 LA2A. You can easily spend $1,000 on a MacBook, and you can just as easily spend $1,000 on an Apollo. It's a tough thing to balance because on one hand, these products are great. They feel solid, they do their jobs well, and they look good at the exact same time. For example, console is laid out in a way that makes so much sense just looking at it. You don't always get that with these interfaces, especially when they're as feature-packed as the ones that I'm reviewing in this series. And the integration with the company's other products is something that you cannot get with the competition. The way that my iPhone can talk to my MacBook, the way that the Apollos work with the UAD plugins. But on the other hand, I just went on a whole rant a minute ago about having to buy a Thunderbolt cable and UAD plugins because, well, this stuff adds up quick. However, there may be an interface that can do what the Apollo does, but cheaper, so make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss that video when it comes out. I have to admit that I've changed my mind about the Apollo series after spending some time with this Twin X. I think they've improved some things over the years, and there's no denying that these interfaces are one of a kind. No, not everyone should buy this interface, but if the things mentioned in this video are meaningful enough for you to buy one, then go for it. But ultimately, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Universal Audio Apollo Twin X Gen 2, as well as which of the three interfaces in this series you want to see come out on top. If you've missed any of the other videos in this series, I'm gonna put a playlist right here and I'll keep it updated as we go. And as always, thanks for hanging out.